I don't think we should read too much into it.
OK, well, Parliament's back in Canberra for the start of the year next Tuesday, with many MPs and senators assembling for other duties on this day next week. With the way the world is at present, there are more than a few contentious topics to deal with, some already known, others no doubt are still to come up. We'll regularly get perspectives as broadly as we can across the Parliament this year. But for the first time, we're spanning the continent today. Joining us from the top end, Labor MP Luke Gosling is in Darwin. Welcome, Luke. And Liberal MP Aaron Violi is in Melbourne. Welcome back to you, Aaron. Aaron, you are, as we say, our inaugural panel for 2024. So let's launch straight in, both of you. Luke, we'll go to you first of all. Stage 3 tax cuts. Broken promises can be very enduring, as Tony Abbott, Julia Gillard and Kevin Rudd's governments discovered. Sometimes they're impossible to live down. Why won't this one dog the Albanese government as others before it have?
Oh, I think it's pretty simple, Greg, because 85% of people in my electorate here in Darwin and Palmerston are going to get more tax relief, and that's going to be better for them and their families. And so generally, across the board, I think most people on very high wages, understand that people are doing it tough. So people who are on lower wages than them must be doing it even tougher. So the tennis crowd aside, all those Aussie battlers out there at the final of the tennis, I think what people see in this is a tax setting that favoured those on very high incomes that was established 5 years ago. It is no longer relevant for this day and age where we are today in 2024, and for the 2024-25 financial year, it's more appropriate that we give more Australians more tax relief so they can keep more of their hard-earned money. So I think people we'll see that for what it is. It's responsible and it's fair. All
right, well, I guess we'll get an indication of people's verdict on that before too long. Dunkley by-election down not that far away from you, Aaron Violi, will be one such measure. But looking at your role in the Parliament, Aaron, will you be able to vote against enlarged tax cuts to lower and middle income earners, as is the case for everyone under about $146,500 a year on income?
Well, to understand our position on how we're going to vote as a party, Greg, it's important we see the legislation. We haven't seen that yet from Anthony Albanese and this government. We always know with Labor the devil is in the detail. So once we see the legislation, we'll go through our normal processes as a party room to finalise our position. But we need to understand and take a step back, and this is a significant breach of faith by this Prime Minister, someone that said his word is his bond. Well, the Australian public now know that his word is not his bond. And I was talking to a community member today about them, and he's actually going to benefit from the tax cuts. But he said to me and raised the point, well, I'll benefit today, but how do I know what the Prime Minister and this government's going to do in the future? And that's the reality for the Australian people, whether it's capital gains tax, negative gearing, a death tax. We don't know what's next. But let's also look at the perspective where the Prime Minister has said that this is about cost of living. Well, he made the decision with his government last year to slug every low and middle income earner with an extra $1,500 when he let the low and middle income offset lapse. So he could have changed his position on that $1,500 last year.
That was pre-legislated too, though, wasn't it?
And he has shown that he's prepared to change his position, Greg, on legislation today. So he could have changed his position on those last year. And even if you look at most Australians will gain $804 in that low and middle income bracket. That, for perspective for viewers, is $15 a week starting on the 1st of July. Petrol in my community is $2.19 today. That's about 6 litres of petrol in about 5 months that this government is promising people for cost of living. So he's broken his promise, he's broken his word, and he's not delivering significant, tangible relief to Australians today. He's making them wait 5 months. It's $15 a week for most, and he could have acted last year when he slugged everyone an extra $1,500 on their tax
All right,
bill.
well, I reckon it's going to be a hell of an argument in the coalition as you seek to punish this broken promise, but yet no one seems to be able to bring themselves to a position where they say they'll vote against this. But we'll watch that space. I know there are processes still to run through on that. Negative gearing, Luke Gosling. Some in caucus, I really can't accurately gauge how many, think that a wholesale review of all policies should take place now in view of changed circumstances. Why not capital gains and negative gearing on property?
Yeah, I think Jim Chalmers has already been pretty clear on this, that, we're not looking at that at all. And I just can't help but, just reflect on what Aaron was saying there, is that $800 extra doesn't mean much to people in Middle Australia and those on lower incomes. Like, that's real money, and that's going to help with a whole range of cost of living issues, and that's where we're focused on Middle Australia and helping them keep more of their hard-earned cash. So, no to the negative gearing issue, and I just find it astonishing that they're already wheeling out the scare campaigns on things like death taxes, which just shows how useless and really devoid of ideas that the federal opposition is.
But that's the legacy of breaking a promise. To go back to my original question to you, Luke, once you go there, those floodgates start to open. This is a natural consequence, isn't it, in political argument?
Do they? With anyone with a brain would say that, a tax setting that was established 5 years ago after we've had a recession, the impact of overseas wars, the cost of living crunch is on, it's real. And to have people from the opposition say that $800 extra in a Aussie family's budget's not a big deal is ridiculous. So, I mean, let's just show a bit of common sense here and say that these settings are more appropriate to help Middle Australia and people on lower incomes, and let's just have proper debates and not resort to scare tactics. All
right, last word on that, Aaron. Are you seeking to scare in highlighting, I suppose, the purchasing power of what Luke points out is about $800 for most people in those lower brackets?
Oh, and I said that in my point, that it's $800, but it's $15 a week, which will help. It's in 5 months' time, but in the scope of inflation, interest rates going up, it's not going to make a significant difference. It will clearly make a difference. $15, as I said, it's about 6 litres of petrol. But, I mean, it's interesting that Luke does say that the Treasurer ruled out today that their position hasn't changed on negative gearing. Well, we've heard that script before. We've heard for the last 18 months, well, actually the last 2+ years, this government say that nothing was happening. Even 2 weeks ago, this Prime Minister was saying nothing was happening on stage 3 tax cuts, and lo and behold, circumstances changed. Given we're seeing house prices increase significantly for all Australians, and housing is a significant concern, it's not a leap at all to say that negative gearing is clearly on the agenda for this government, and we're seeing the same playbook. Unnamed backbenchers, the unions are starting to talk about negative gearing need to be reviewed. This is exactly what happened with the stage 3 tax cuts. So this is what happens when, and Luke might be uncomfortable and call it a scare campaign, but it's a fact, Luke, when your government and your Prime Minister breaks his word and the caucus endorses it, the Australian people legitimately ask, what's the value of the Treasurer saying it's not on the agenda? Might not be today. Circumstances change tomorrow, and we've got negative gearing post-election. It's something they have to deal with. That's the reality of the choices this government have made. People can't trust them. All right,
we'll be talking about this and other matters. I want to take you to some overseas issues in just a moment. One almost final one domestically. Luke Gosling, ACCC's final report on childcare out today. It does show that the subsidies have worked, the enlarged subsidies, to alleviate price pressures on out-of-pocket fees paid by parents in many markets, but not in all. What is the solution to that based on this report that you can see? I know they talk about government intervention, but what is that?
Yeah, and there was talk about every level of government, and certainly here in my electorate in Darwin and Palmerston, the councils have some early childhood education care centres, and I mean, I think everyone does have a role to play. But again, this is, we saw problems, we saw difficulties with cost of living, so we moved to help people out. And this is another example where in my electorate it's 12% better for families when it comes to paying their early childhood education fees. And that's real cost of living savings in their pocket. So we're going to have a look at the Productivity Commission review as well, and then look at what we can do to simplify some of those settings around the childcare subsidy and also the hourly rate cap to see, and that was some of the recommendations. So we'll combine the ACCC report's findings, and we'll look at the Productivity Commission report, and we'll make sensible changes, because the bigger picture is what we want for Australia is universal, affordable early childhood education and care for young Australians. Doesn't matter where you live in the country, and we don't want to forget those on the lowest wages as well, or those that are really struggling. And I just lastly point out, Greg, that under Morrison's Stage 3 tax cuts, if you earned under 45 grand, you got no help, no support at all. So, I mean, we just got our priorities right, I think.
All right, Aaron Violi, the subsidies are working, at least in many sections of the country, but not everywhere. Is there a further role for government, even if it's price monitoring and reporting, to try and bring some vibrancy to childcare fees and markets around the country?
Well, Greg, this report has highlighted an issue that we in the Coalition have been talking about for the last 18 months, and that's around supply. In my community, in the Yarra Valley, in the Dandenong Ranges, getting a childcare place has been one of the most significant issues, with wait lists of up to 2 years. And so this money that the government put in, while it's putting some downward pressure for those that have a place, there was not $1 that went to additional supply, and that's ultimately the solution. If we have more supply, we have more operators, then that will bring prices down and allow those that need care to be able to get it, and that's where the focus needs to be.
OK, let's move offshore internationally, as I said we would. The UN Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Australia's pausing its funding there for reasons that we've already covered on the program. Luke, I might go to you first of all. This would need to be only a short-term pause, wouldn't it, if people aren't to be collectively punished there in Gaza and surrounds?
Yeah, it's got to be a quick investigation, obviously, because we don't want pauses to important humanitarian assistance that we support, Australia supports, along with the US, Canada, the UK, just to name a few. But what's really vital is they get to the bottom of it, because over there, and I've worked in this part of the world, it's really important that the UN is trusted as a fair and neutral operator. And if
has that been undermined, has it?
It has been undermined, so a thorough investigation that's done as quickly as possible is absolutely what it's needed, because more and more, as there are tensions spreading in this part of the world, we need the United Nations and other non-government organisations, large ones that are assisting, to be seen as absolutely just there to assist people in need.
All right, Aaron, can that trust be restored in UNRWA?
Well, this is the real challenge, and I'll pay credit to the government and say the pause was the correct decision given the investigation and the reports that we've seen. And we need to remember that Hamas is a listed terrorist organisation. It's illegal for an Australian citizen to send money to support them, so we need to make sure clearly that taxpayer money is not going to support Hamas in any way. As Luke said, it is vital that we get aid to those that need it, but for the integrity of the system and for Australian taxpayers to have confidence, we need to ensure that every dollar we send in aid is going to those that need it and not to Hamas or a terrorist organisation.
All right, a quick one back home, and I left it to the end deliberately because it's very much in the beltway. It concerns the Canberra Press Gallery, and that's not what this program is here to talk about. We try to keep it real for the outside world, but we're referring here to respected, long-time and experienced reporter Catherine Murphy. She's leaving the Guardian Australia, and she will be joining Anthony Albanese's prime ministerial office. Now, Aaron Violi, your leader, Peter Dutton, went on X today to gratuitously take a swipe at her and another press gallery colleague. He says, amongst other things, I'm genuinely shocked to see Murpharoo, that's Catherine Murphy, take up a spot to now be officially running Labor's lines, or lines for Labor. Is that necessary, the cheap shots from the leader's office?
Oh, I think, Greg, it's just a little bit of good light-hearted humour on social media, as you said, very much in the Beltway. I mean, I think the bigger concern is, Catherine Murphy's been on the record repeatedly urging the Prime Minister to break his promise and break his word and his bond with the Australian people. So he's brought in another senior person that's going to continue to tell him that it's okay to break his word, and I think that is the biggest issue. It's no surprise. I mean, maybe the surprise is that that Catherine went to the Labor Party and not the Greens, but just a bit of good-hearted fun to start the parliamentary year.
All right. Well, I don't know whether they see it in that light, but last word to you, Luke Gosling, whether it be on the appointment, the substantive appointment of Murpharoo, Catherine Murphy, or on the Dutton X posting. Any of that cause you any concern?
No, but I reckon it would have irked Peter Dutton to know that someone with such an incredible intelligence as Murpharoo has would be seeing that Albo is the future as far as proper policy based on evidence that's going to assist Australians. But also notice that he had a go at David Crowe as well, who's obviously not with News Limited. So I think what it was really is that Peter Dutton is supposed to be an alternate Prime Minister, but he really doesn't like journalists that aren't from his stable that are just trotting out coalition lines. So it doesn't surprise me that he's a bit put out.
All right. Well, as I say, we're not going to go any longer on that. This is not about the press gallery. It is about policy for the most part, which means we'll return to other matters on that front. Luke Gosling and Aaron Violi regularly throughout the year. But thanks for kicking us off for 2024.